Virginia Satir, internationally recognized as a pioneer in family therapy and human relations, dedicated her life to developing and teaching skills to improve relationships with both families and organizations. Her goal was to raise social consciousness about the importance of world peace, individual health, and personal responsibility. This videotape training series demonstrates these goals. Although Virginia died in 1988, her wisdom and spirit live on through her teachings. In 1987, Virginia Satir was videotaped at the Avanta-sponsored Virginia Satir International Summer Institute in Crested Butte, Colorado. In this human learning laboratory, Virginia and her training staff worked for 4 weeks with 90 people from around the world. This tape is one of a series which contains specially selected teaching units from the last process community that Virginia taught.
I do two things. I do more than two things. But when I'm introducing something, I want to develop the specific context and then a perspective within which to view what's going to happen. So I can add another word to that. We already did a context here. And now a perspective. And what I want now to discuss, the subject matter I want to discuss and present, has to do with rules that we learn that are related always to survival. What rules do we learn for survival? So I want to develop a perspective in which we can look at these rules and then look at the effect of these rules on our real survival and living. To be able to live and not die, I suppose you could say, is the first level of survival. But then be able to go on and build on that survival so that you feel great about living. Because there are people who just live at the first level, and they don't make any mistake, quote and unquote, and they don't make any ripples, and they don't have any joy. They just are there. However, some of those survivals go the opposite way. They don't even allow for that. They get us into pain and into terrible problems, but we don't know what to do with them. So the perspective I want now to develop is one in which we can see how, first of all, how the rules develop, then how they work, and then what we can do to change the ones that don't fit us anymore. All right. Now, first of all, I want to say a couple of things that are so obvious, but we forget. We are all born little. I want you to think of that for a minute. Now, I'd like you to think of yourself, how many pounds you were when you were born. I was 9. What were you? 7.5. 7. 7.5. 6. Anybody 5? 4? 3? Okay. You were 3? Look what happened to you. Anyway. All right. We are at pounds, not as big as a 10-pound sack of potatoes. I just want us to get into that picture. We are born little. And that is the absolute truth. But you know what's interesting? When you meet adults, many of them act as though they weren't born little. But we are little. So I'm going to start my perspective with we are all, here we can say all, born little. And that's important to remember. Everybody else around us is bigger than we are. That is also a fact. That's very interesting. It's always a fact. Everyone else is bigger. Even if one of the everyones is only born 12 months before we were, or 9 months, or 10 months, they're always bigger. We're the littlest thing around at the time of birth. Just want to be in touch with that. Everyone else around is bigger. Okay? The second thing is that we move from one environment to another, and however long it takes to move our head from the inside of our mother's body to the outside. And the time between when we have to get our nose out before we can experience a new environment. Each one of us moves from one environment which is multi-purpose, completely safe, and we behave as fish in that place within a matter of seconds. Move to a totally different environment. This is important to remember. We all did it. We were all in water, and then suddenly, there we are. And we never had any swimming lessons, nor did we have lessons for how to get out of the water. We just are there. All right. So that's we call the process of birth. Birth is moving from one environment to the other, as far as we're concerned. What it requires in the body to survive is quite different from what it requires on the outside. I always wondered, inside, breath, we don't breathe in the same way we do outside. And yet we live. That's when we're like fish. Anyway. Now, in our world, there's been more and more awareness about that tremendous journey that goes from one environment to the other. And there are people now who behave at the time of birth as though this is an important thing. Not just pulling the baby out, but being aware we're moving into a different environment. And there was the Frenchman's name. What's his name? Frederick Le Boyer, yes, who said, we have to work at this transition. We have to keep some of the same pictures and the music and the lights and all the rest of that. A recognition of this tremendous thing. And you know what? It doesn't matter what the economics are or what the attitudes are or whatever. This is a fact. This is a fact. We move from one environment to the other. Many of us were born with instruments pulling us out. And then into hospitals where we went to become a part of being very clean, but not much contact. Anyway, there were all kinds of things about that. But what I want to put down some facts. First impressions are powerful. That's another thing we have to look at. First impressions out of first experiences are very powerful. Okay. That means that the experience of birth is a powerful one. Now, none of the experiences we have are without the ability to be modified or changed, and I know that. But I think this is important for us to remember. How we are treated at birth, our body learns from it. Every cell learns what it felt like, what kind of touch came, what kind of air came, what kind of voices came, and so on. I want this to be descriptive rather than evaluative. I'd like you to know you never had a hand on you until you got born. You never had a voice coming into your ears in the same way. That's new. And so there's an experience. All right? And there are all kinds of conditions, all kinds of contexts. Now you can hear me when I say that, in which we are born. We were born in a field. We can be born in a fancy schmancy hospital with 6 doctors around. We can be born with a midwife. We can be born with our fathers attending our mothers in a taxi cab, on a street. We can be born in all kinds of places. All right. We can also have all kinds of stories about how come the egg and sperm got together, because here is another fact. We couldn't even come unless a sperm and an egg had united. The sperm and egg don't give a darn. I don't know that I've talked to them. I can't tell you that. But I don't think the sperm or egg give a darn about what the context is. They just want to do it. They manage in such a way so that they are there to suck each other up when they get there with great delight, because that's life manifesting itself. All right, they don't care what else is going on. Okay. So, however, human beings take great stock, it seems like, in the history of how the egg and sperm got together. It hasn't been till very recently, where we said if an egg and sperm gets together in a pair of people who aren't married, we will deny property rights and citizenship to the outcome of that couple. I don't know how many countries that's still true, but there may be still some. So, and then we also give a status to children in terms of whether they favor one family over another family. I don't know how many of you have heard, my family, my mother's family, let's say, wasn't as well respected as my father's family. So the kids that come that resemble father's family are likely to be more respected than the ones that form mother's family. How many of you know about that? Okay, so anyway, now I want to put down just some facts here at this time. So far, these are all unquestionable facts. There's another one now that I believe is no longer questioned, but once was, and that is everything that happens to us is registered. Everything, every breath, every touch, every sound is registered on this newborn. Everything registered. The problem is that we never register the interpretation because nobody ever gives it to us. So when we are born, our mother is sad because our father is away in the war, let's say, because that happened a lot in World War II, and she's crying. When she cries, it's out of grief. We don't know that. When her body is racked with sobs as she holds us, maybe the day before got the letter that maybe her husband was missing in action, that's our father. And she holds you, and she sobs. You don't know what that is. You do the best you can. In her sobbing, her arms may be tied. So we get a message that is sobbing means there's something bad going on. But we can't find out about it. I'm very impressed with how we get this recall. I have done it many, many times when I do reconstructions. Anyway, it's all registered there. That means that all our experiences are accessible. What isn't then accessible, no, erase that. All our experiences are accessible. But since we didn't have any interpretations, we pick the interpretation that's the best we can do. And this is important. So we're equipped with this wonderful brain, and the brain has got to. The cognitive brain has got to make connections between, even if they don't fit, and we call that nonsense. Nonsense, not nonsense. The brain has to put things together. We cannot leave it unconnected. And it's in those connections that we have so many problems. Like, we are 2 years old, our brother is born, our brother cries a lot and maybe has a lot of illness. Our mother does not give attention to us as she did before, and the connection we make is she doesn't like us as well. It won't be till much later when we do a reconstruction or have some other way of seeing that scene of a young mother with a 2-year-old who is now having a child with some very difficult physical things and cannot pay attention to the child. And then we can make new connections. Probably one of the most important things that I try to help people to learn is that the old connections are the best you can make. Hold them up to the light of new possibilities and you get new connections. And this is very basic. The chances are about 100% that everybody's attitudes, 99, I'll leave a little space. Everybody's attitudes about how they were rejected as children are made up of this kind of stuff. There's no way a child can know what else is going on. No way. Often. Oh, that's not accurate. Many parents don't know how to tell their children what's going on. So the explanation can't even register. So what we're doing, remember, the human brain makes connections, sense or nonsense. And one of the things I think that all the therapies are involved with in some way is to try to look at old things with new eyes. Because in an oversimplified way, what we do is we look at old things, we find out that we're to blame, and then we go through life trying to make penance. Or blame it on somebody else. And not seeing the whole picture. That's why the work I do, I think, is so helpful, because we don't work on blame, but work on new pictures. Okay. Right. Now within this frame comes another process which follows from the one I've just saying. We register everything. But let's look at the condition of the self for the moment. Since we don't have a map of where we are, I never see birth processes presented with maps. They just don't do it. Or little bags of directions about how to grow and develop. All the growth is made, what I say, the best that's possible. And here we start a relationship between the child and the parent where neither one knows what the other's doing. At the same time, everybody has to make conclusions about it. I'll give you a little example. A mother is feeling tense for some reason. She holds her baby, and the baby cries. And the more she tries to hold the baby, the more the baby cries. And so she, in desperation, gives the baby, let's say, to her husband, and the baby just coos. All right. Now, she's able to make the connection, it's like that old banana story, that the father is better liked by the baby than she is. Now, that can become hurtful, especially if she's got a rule that she's supposed to be at least equal. But most mothers want to be more than equal. Now, another thing in that same situation, as she goes toward the bed of the baby after a while, the baby withdraws. Then she has a new validation that this baby doesn't like her. But she may not look at it that way because that's too hard. So she may instead look at it as though the father may be doing something to take the baby's affections away. Or she may infer that in her family was this child who became schizophrenic or became withdrawn, and at the age of 4 days she's seeing the symptoms. This is not unusual. Or what has happened? Both are putting together the best they know. The baby, where did all this start? The baby's body, being held tight, wanted to get comfortable. The mother didn't know that. She didn't know that her promise and delivery was not the same, that her feeling of wanting to love was not the same as the experience of her arms. In fact, this whole touch thing, probably more responsible for manipulations and misunderstandings than almost anything. Watch the next time you see a parent and a baby. Watch what they do. Watch how they hold them. And then you can begin to get some kind of an idea of some of the funny ideas we get. I saw one yesterday in the airport. It was the child was hanging out with one leg, and the father had sort of an arm like this and was talking to somebody, and the baby was trying to go like that, and at a certain point he just patted here and went right on. And I thought, that child is learning so much. That parent never even has an awareness of that. So anyhow, I just want you to be in touch with the fact that these quote, dialogues, which are not validated, go on and become later on arenas for either fighting or bonding. Now, okay, this is a part of the context now. Then I have to bring you to another piece, which I think as late as 1920, people were saying that you put children on a schedule because that will develop character. You do not respond to them when they cry because that will also help them to become people of strength. In other words, build love on frustration, because that's good. There are places now where the first thing happens after you're born is you get dumped in ice water. And if you survive, it's all right, and if not, well, that's the way it should be. That's still going on, by the way. So, if we look now at this whole business of the fact, in addition to what I didn't mention, is children should be seen and not heard. Children are not very smart. Children are people. You don't get to be a person till you're 14 or 20. All right, so the attitude of, and I'm going to say parents or society, helps to shape the potential of the child. So many people have mentioned here about support. I could do it if I had support. And you got support. Children don't get much support because they're just children. They don't need it anyway. We don't still have in the world an idea, beliefs that support the fact that children are people. So until we get that, I'm going to have plenty of work to do, and so will you. Because if we're not treated as people, then of course we get all these other funny ideas. So, now I give you another thing. This is something I made up. I believe it. All that adults are children grown big, nothing else. Remember that. All that adults are children grown big. And they will use what they have learned in the grown-up form, what they learn as children. Example, 2 kids learned that this is what I do. Do it back to me. Come on up and do it back to me. All right, we do this, mother and daughter or sisters or pairs of any kind. So when I'm grown up, I do the same thing. Or I do the reverse. Are you aware that the same thing and the reverse are the same thing?
Say again.
All right. This is the reverse of both of us down on our knees falling on each other. And they're both the same thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Now, here's the place where my compassion comes in. If adults are only they learn as children, and they're using the new forms, I can connect with those children inside of them that didn't learn how to love, didn't learn a whole lot of things. So this then is an invitation for compassion after you get through with some of the terrible feelings you have. That's why I'm recommending in every community we have a cuddle for parents where they can learn how to give to their children what they didn't have because they get it. All right. Now you can see, if you have those attitudes, which I think are based on fact, then one of the things you're going to be always alerted to is that we're always making conclusions, but there's nothing that says that those conclusions fit the facts. And that doesn't mean people are liars. It only means that they don't have all the information. And I would this is learning, and I would like to apply, apply is another word. Something happened to me, which I think is a story that fits learning. When I was 9 years old, I told you I lived on a farm and I absolutely adored books. I read from the time I was 3, and I had this wonderful book. It was on the world. I still remember. It was green, and it had the world on it, and wonderful. And I saw a picture, and it was a picture of a big hole. I looked at it. Underneath it said Grand Canyon. I thought, that's something else. I never saw such a big hole. So I had a whole big idea about what the Grand Canyon was. Everything I knew about holes, H-O-L-E-S, I put into that fantasy. And I said to myself, when I'm older, I want to know more about the Grand Canyon. Never heard of or seen such a big hole. When I was 15, that's 6 years later, isn't it? 9, 16 years. I met somebody, and they said, we have been to the Grand Canyon. I said, well, what was it? Well, they told me what they saw and all that. My first picture was altered by what they told me. So now I had a new picture of the Grand Canyon because I had new information that I was willing to take in. When I was 20, which is only 7 years later, I went down to the canyon on a mule. And I loved it. Now, there was a lot in my head about what the Grand Canyon was like that wasn't what I found. That didn't make it wrong or right. It only meant that as I deepened my awareness and my experience with things, I got new information. All born little. And we come to this world, and you come here with memories and reflections and conclusions about what happened. What I hope to happen with people is that they say, yeah, that's where I was. I was 9, I was 6, I was 5. Okay, now I'm open to seeing more about what all that was. The difference between me and the Grand Canyon is that I didn't think that the Grand Canyon defined me. It was something of excitement, so that's where the analogy breaks down. Most of us have felt that what happened to us in our growing up defines what we are. All right, context. Now, I have 2 more words with this, and then I'm going to go back to this. Context, contact, communication. Okay. All right. The simplest way that I can start off with an appreciation of the meaning of context is to say that it answers the following questions. Where, which is always here. When, which is always now. And who is me and you, me always for sure, and you if you're there. The when, where, when, and who. That then moves into another place where it is in a space, which is a little different than here, and in time. Okay, now these are the barest minimum of the variables context. Meaning, always this place, this time, this person, this space, and this time. Now that all adds up to the context is always specific to place, person, time, and purpose. Always specific. Now, if I say to you that everything happens in a context, then I am being universal, because you cannot get away from a context. But a lot of people behave as though you might be able to. One of the interesting things that I got at this conference, because it was mixed, was that the context is what really sets the stage for everything. And that any scientific experiment that goes on without relating to the context is going to be skewed. It can't help it. And we used to think that there was something that could be without the context. It cannot be. Context then is this place, this person, this time, this space, and you could also say this purpose right here. Okay. All right, that's what context is. I'll give you a little example. I always use silly examples because they seem to make the most meaning. There is a state of affairs in which a human being can be without clothes. We call it being nude. In and of itself, it is that condition in which the skin, total skin, is revealed. That's what nudity is. Okay? Now I can talk about that, and I can paint pictures and all that. Now, if I am nude downtown Manhattan, the police will come, won't they? Or unless somebody comes out with clothes and hides me in the basement or something of that sort. Because that is nudity in that context doesn't fit. However, if when I'm wanting to take a bath, I don't remove my clothes, that doesn't fit either. Now, to take off my clothes or to appear without my clothes, maybe not in Manhattan, but in a party where I don't know people. Or it's 45 degrees below zero, and I go without my clothes. I will be frozen. I'm not becoming aware of the context. So if I can leave that very simple definition, but I think it takes a total, it really conveys a total meaning. Everything we do has to be looked at in terms of the context. Now, that's a part, as I said, that many people have not been aware of. Now, I will just tell you another thing about context. Context also determines in part the potential for contact. Now, let me give you an example of that. Suppose that in your context, this room, let's say, there's somebody over there and somebody over there. And that's where they are, and they try to talk to each other. It will be a little difficult. Or let us say that the context is made up of a number of places where there will be little walls that will be that tall. That will change what you do. Okay. So what we really come to when we do this is it's not enough to speak about what's going on in your insides or your outsides. You have to speak of who is there, where is it, who else is there, what's the time of day, what's the temperature, and what's the purpose. What's the purpose? See, in an oversimplified way, I think what people tried to do is they tried to say that there's something that's pure that doesn't relate to context, and I don't believe that's so at all. When your child cries and a dog is coming that the child is frightened of, that's a different thing from a child crying when you have the child in your arms, as an example. Of course, in that same space where the dog is coming and you're there and your little child is crying, you also might be crying. And what this really helps us do is to recognize that whatever happens is multivariable. So there's no way that we can say, this is what you have to do. This is the primary factor. And that's why when I talk and I literally and consciously put what I am doing always in a context. This is part, it seems to me, of thinking universally. If you're hungry, very, very hungry, and you happen to pass a bakery shop, let's say, where the wares are out, and you're so hungry, and you don't have any money in your pocket, the availability of that bakery goods, let's say, your need is so strong because it's related to survival, may result in you taking that piece of bakery. That's a different kind of context from that you've got plenty of money in your pocket. You just like the idea of playing a little game with the proprietor. How much can I get away with? So what I maybe said enough to introduce you to the fact that whenever we look at anything, we have to look at it in its totality. And it always has the same factors to it. This time, this place, this person, this temperature, the inside of a person, the outside of a person, their thoughts and feelings, that's all a piece of it. When I look, for instance, at a child who's abused, the child is abused, the blood's running down the face, there isn't any question, but there's been a head injury of some sort. Maybe serious, maybe not so serious. All right, we could think of that, rush that child to the hospital, and have the wound sewed up. And we could say that, and some people do, all right, the kid now there's no more blood coming, and the injury, the wound has been sewed up. This, by the way, is a simplistic way in which a lot of people have operated. However, it wouldn't be enough also to say that father hit her or him with his hand. That's also a factor. It's part of that, because when he hit, the child's head slammed against the wall, and this is what created the slam against the wall was what created the wound. But here was the force that hit him. That's still not enough. There's a mother there. And so what is the mother doing when the child is doing this? Well, the mother may be signaling, internally, I'm so scared, but I'm afraid to talk to you, and freezes. It might be that the mother goes and gets the gun and shoots the father, or shoots the child for causing the father difficulty. I mean, all these things. So what the context is a plea for looking at a total picture. We have so much in the social sciences and in our myths that A causes B. We're back to that kind of thing. So that's what it is. Now, I want to just say then, I look at the context because the context will give me all the clues that I need in order to understand behavior that goes within the context, at least to understand the foundation of it. Then I look at the contact that goes on within the context. Example, I could move into a family where a child has just been injured, and everybody except the child is looking, quote, calm. I know they're scared to death, but they look calm. Or they're all looking that they want to kill me when I come in. I'm an outsider. The communication will follow that. So these are a triad. I'm sorry to tell you, again, we got more triads. The context, the contact, and the communication. They all fit together. And one does not exist without the other. There's no such thing as communication existing without contact and context. So what really we have, if we think about it then, in way of understanding, we have so many little pieces that make a difference in our understanding. And you know, the very simplistic way that we have in the past, I don't know how many of you have been involved with that, but I know I was. You make an assessment of a person without context, without looking internally, without looking externally, without looking at the other people. When people get goaded by somebody, I've seen this often, kids at a table, one kid is pinching the other one under the table while they're eating and looking angelic going on, and the other one is hitting them across the face on the top of the table. The parents see this one, they don't see what's underneath. Those are just examples of this. We can hurt ourselves a lot in understanding, and we can remain ignorant a lot too if we don't look at the context. Now, I wonder, Diane, does that help you with at least my picture of the context?
Yes, I was interested in the specific term learning context.
Okay. Now we will take that one. If I follow what I'm talking about, then I'm going to create a space. Well, look here. I'm going to create a place and a time with people who are in touch with the inner outer part, and use this space and time in every way that I can to make an environment that is trustable. and one in which risks can be taken. Risks for extending yourself. And one of the criteria in that is that we have the freedom to comment what's going on. So this is then, in that, because it's from that context that we will start our work. Now, the contact that I and the trainers provide is a freedom to connect with you, to share with you, to ask you, to respond to you, and then to model that you can do that with each other. So that what we do becomes a model for what you do. That's the contacting. And in my case, and it's maybe more or less with other trainers, but with me, I have a lot of physical contact with people. Connecting in a physical way, as well as with an ear way to you. And I know that people do that here. And then in the communication, to practice congruent communication. So that in the learning context here, we then try to maintain, and I think we do. Of course, everybody falls by the wayside once in a while. You don't have any fun, I guess, some people say, that if you don't have a chance to pick yourself up. But this context, this learning context, is geared toward making it possible to develop trust so we can take risks. Developing trust and taking risks means we have to be safe to be vulnerable. And you've had now many experiences with people who are sharing their vulnerability, and all they get is support. Have you noticed that? How many of you have noticed? All right. So this is different from many of the usual contexts, where to share your vulnerability can make you a target. And that's not what we do here, because I don't think learning goes on in that kind of context. That's why I could never stand people beating each other. I couldn't stand people confronting each other in these negative ways. I know all kinds of good ways to confront people, but not in a negative sort of way. So that's where that is. And I guess, too, I find that if I am in touch with this, the tendency to blame gets less and less and less and less. Now, these are not ways to excuse, they're ways to discover. Can you make a difference with that? Because I remember some people said, well, her mother was thus, thus, and thus, and that's why this child is this way. Well, that's a piece we can learn for discovery, but it is not an excuse for our behavior, if you know what I'm talking about. So if I want to change your behavior, of course I will try to understand what you learned and how you perceived it a moment in time, because I know everybody did. But the behavior itself, we cannot lose accountability, because to do that means to demean ourselves. Are you aware of that? That if we don't take responsibility for our behavior, we demean ourselves. We also demean our power, because we say that, what was it, the devil made me do it? Well, the devil is around a lot of places.
Avanta, the Virginia Satir Network, founded in 1977, is a nonprofit educational organization. Membership is worldwide, representing a variety of professions. Avanta sponsors workshops, advanced training programs, international summer institutes, and conferences dedicated to guiding people of the world to become more fully human.